All right. Welcome, everybody, and good day from wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to today's event, AI Basics for Extension, Intro to Using Generative AI, hosted by the Extension Foundation. We value accessibility and strive to make our events inclusive for all participants. If you need accommodations or technical assistance, please reach out to our technical host through chat. And you can see in her name, tech host Molly Immendorf, so you can find her in the participant list. Please note that we are recording this video and automated closed captions are available. For information about our recording policy, our accessibility accommodations, and guidelines regarding the use of AI technology by participants, including the use of tools like Otter AI, please let us know if you'd like to have more information. Please reach out to Molly and she can help connect you with that. So due to the number of folks that we've had today and are expecting today, we've made a couple different changes from our normal approach to our webinars. So we're treating this for our sessions like this. We're treating this more as a webinar. So if you need to reach out to one of the host or co-host, the technical host, please utilize chat for that. We will be providing a Q&A feature of Zoom in order to have you ask questions and get those answered, and we will do our best to answer them along the way. We will have a Q&A session later on today, which I will talk about in a few minutes. So it looks like we do have a few more people who are coming in, so we'll let them get in here and get settled. All right. It looks like it's slowed down enough that we can go ahead and begin. So my name is Jason Weigel, and I'm the NTAE Program Manager here for the Extension Foundation. And I'm excited and honored to be joined by 4 other presenters here this afternoon. The first one I'd like to introduce is Dr. Barbara O'Neill, who is the owner and CEO of MoneyTalk, who is a distinguished professor emerita from Rutgers University, and who is a member of the OneUp Personal Finance Concentration Area. And if you're not familiar with OneUp, you may recognize them under their former name, the Military Families Learning Network. Mark Locklear is a web developer and project manager here with the foundation, and he's based at North Carolina State University. Victor Villegas will be joining us in a bit. He is the Technology and Media Support Coordinator for the Division of Extension Engagement at Oregon State University. And David Warren is the Senior Director of Digital Strategies at Oklahoma State University and is the former Extension Foundation Fellow in Artificial Intelligence. Molly will be posting in the chat, if she hasn't already, a link to the presenter bios. This is give you an idea of who we all are. We will be including this link as well as a link to the presentation, the slides we'll be talking to, and other resources that we will be discussing throughout the day in a follow-up email that will follow along sometime later next week or sometime next week. We also need to start out with a couple of disclaimers. The foundation is aware that some institutions have banned or limited usage of generative AI technologies. We recommend that you check with your institution before utilizing any of the technology discussed or demonstrated here today. This session is intended for professional development and is academic in nature. And we're also going to be talking a lot about trade names and brand names. And where we utilize those, we're using them only for the purpose of information with the understanding that no discrimination is intended and no endorsement by the foundation is implied. So with all of that out of the way, let's talk about what we're going to be learning about today. This is going to be a very high-level overview of artificial intelligence. And what I mean by high view is like probably space station level overview of artificial intelligence. We could spend 90 minutes easily on each of the slides that we will have here today talking about these things. So because of that and the amount of information that we'd like to cover, the slides are very much text heavy, and there's a lot of information and tips and tricks embedded in them. We intentionally did this so that you can use the slides as a resource after you receive them in the email next week. We can't and aren't going to go through everything that's contained on them. They're a tool for you to utilize as you begin your journey in the AI space. And as I mentioned earlier, we will have a Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Hopefully we can answer a lot of the questions that you have. And if we can, we will take those and we'll do our research on them, and we will post them in the Connect Extension Technology and Extension Education subgroup. And if you aren't familiar with that, it's a group of professionals from across the system who are working on integrating technology into extension work. And it's a free group to join. All you need to do is set up a free account in Connect Extension and then click the join button, and you can become part of that group. If there are other questions and there are other things and topics that you're interested in learning, please utilize our 1-minute feedback form. This is an opportunity for you to not only get bigger picture questions answered around artificial intelligence, but also tell us what are the topics that we're going to be talking about today, or which of the topics we're going to be talking about today are of interest to you for more information. And so I'm going to pop that link into the chat, maybe, if my computer will let me copy it. There we go. Cool. And so please do utilize that tool as a way to provide some insight into the topics that you're interested in exploring more, as well as, and hopefully to get some of the questions that we may leave you with by the end of the presentation today. So with all the formality behind us, or the introduction behind us, let's actually jump into discussing artificial intelligence. I want to give a quick thank you to David Warren for providing the foundational notes for this section. They were extremely helpful in helping me kind of build this dialogue that we're going to, or it's really going to be a monologue for the most part, around artificial intelligence today. And so for me, the story of artificial intelligence is a story that I think all of us in Extension are very familiar with, that of adoption and diffusion. And I know some of the text might be a little hard to see on here, but one of the things that I was kind of amazed when I started diving into the lore, if you will, of artificial intelligence is that it's been around for quite a while. Originally, the concept and some of the early framework for it was built in the late 40s and early 50s, with the first AI program actually launched in 1957. And so over the year, as computer processing speeds and computer storage have increased, our ability to utilize artificial intelligence in doing things has increased as well. And so with the dot-com boom in the mid-90s to mid-2000s, you start to see a lot more integration and use of artificial intelligence algorithms in our day-to-day lives. The Google algorithm, the YouTube algorithm, Facebook, Twitter, all of these companies that utilize input and data from customers to customize an experience for you and to provide what they think you are interested in looking at. These are all forms of artificial intelligence. Then about 10 years ago, we started to see the voice to, or the speech to text artificial intelligence start to move onto the scene with things like Siri and Alexa and Google Assistant. And I'm sorry, I apologize if I just set off any of your personal assistants there by saying Siri and Alexa. I had to mute my Alexa device here in my office because it kept going off as I was practicing my presentation for today. So apologies if I turned yours on there by accident. And it's really in the past 7 to 8 months that we've seen the emergence of generative transformer tools using large language models hit the scene and become largely and widely publicly available, along with all the associated issues and questions and concerns that come along with it. So what does all this mean and why is this important is really the point of a lot of the stuff that we're going to be discussing here today. So excuse me. Artificial intelligence is kind of a big catch-all or bucket term that describes a collection of hardware and software concepts that are built around creating intelligent machines or artificial things that can solve problems or come up with information that was typically only reserved for the ability of humans to do. And so artificial intelligence is I like this graphic of artificial intelligence that from IBM that shows it's like a Matryoshka doll, where you have artificial intelligence as the larger outer shell within which everything is contained. And then within that shell, you have things like machine learning, and you have neural networks, and you have deep learning. And even within deep learning, you have more layers like large language models. And so all of these things together are what is known as artificial intelligence. When we're talking about artificial intelligence in terms of today's presentation, we're talking about what is classified as narrow AI or weak AI, as opposed to what is probably more popularly known at least in the science fiction realm, as full or strong AI. Things like Mr. Data from Star Trek Next Generation, or the Terminator and Skynet from the Terminator movies, or HAL 9000 from the Space Odyssey movies. And so what distinguishes narrow and weak AI from full and strong AI are two key concepts, which we'll talk about throughout today's presentation. That of sentience, or the ability to have awareness and feelings, and sapiency, the ability to use judgment in making decisions and pulling information together in a way that you can act on it. And so those two terms are what separate the generative AI tools that we use right now from the full and strong AIs that we see in science fiction movies. And so that's just something that those two terms are critical in thinking about AI and how we use it and could potentially use it. And welcome to everybody else who has popped in along the way. Thanks for being here this afternoon. So the next concept, the next layer of the Matryoshka doll here is the concept of machine learning. And this is a portion of artificial intelligence where you have algorithms that teach themselves. They learn and they identify patterns and other things that we ask them to do without much direct or integrated coding, giving them to do those types of things. So these algorithms are trained on data, training data, and the person or people that are training the model give it feedback and give it information that it then uses to help refine and improve its model in its decision-making ability and come up with outputs that are closer to what is intended for that particular use that it's being asked to do. And it's an iterative process. It doesn't stop after the first round. It's something that generally for most of the ones, publicly available ones, is something that it takes feedback from users and integrates it back into the model to help continue to refine and improve the outputs that come along as a result of the work that's being done. The next layer we'll talk about are neural networks and deep learning neural networks. And the way that I like to think about this as I was learning about this and exploring it is these are like linear regression models. You have an independent variable and a dependent variable, and you're trying to fit that best fit line into all those data points in order to arrive at a model that best approximates what you're looking at. That's sort of what these neural networks are trying to do, but on a much bigger scale. And so there are a number of layers or different aspects that the models and the algorithms are being asked to look at that builds the number of data points, the number of options and things for it to assess. And it can start to, again, with learning, that machine learning, start to fit those pieces together into a best fit type of model. And so, the graphical representation you see here is of one layer is just a bunch of lines. The next layer is a bunch of those lines that have kind of been combined together. And as you increase the complexity of the model, more and more shapes get put together. And the system then puts those things together into a best approximation of the output of what it thinks that you're asking. And then with the assistance of those who are building the model, they assign that label to it that helps it realize that when these lines put themselves together in this pattern, it's an elephant. And so you go from a picture analysis of all the different components of it to an output or an approximation that it then assigns that label to. So that's what neural networks are. They mimic how our brain does this instantly, right? We don't necessarily think, okay, so that elephant's ear is curved, that's the tail, this is the trunk, it's an elephant. You look at it instantly and it's like, it's an elephant. And so our brains understand patterns and context. And if you use the word bark, if I just put it down is bark, you don't know whether I'm talking about asking you to bark like a dog, whether I'm talking about what the dog is doing, or whether I'm talking about the outer covering of a tree. You just know it's the word bark. But as soon as I add other indicators to it, like a dog barks or the tree's bark was rough, automatically it helps to create the context within which that word is being utilized. And so this concept of neural networks and how the context and patterns are built are really important for the work that we're going to be talking about in a little bit, which is crafting and building prompts, because ultimately what we're doing is helping the model understand how it structures its decision-making process to go from an input, our prompt, to an output, what we're asking it to do, and combine all the information that it has along the way into that. And so this graphic from IBM shows the layers, the three greenish colors in the middle, the input layer, the stuff we're putting in, and then the output layer, the things that are coming out. And the system is working its way through an analysis of this as we type into the tool and we put the prompts into the tool. And so this is just a different visualization of what was expressed on the other slide as well. And so the difference between the neural network and the deep neural network is three of those layers sandwiched in between, a minimum of 3 layers in between the input and output. So the more in depth you go, the more refined and the more information that the model has, which is where the final component of our doll here is large language models. So large language models are really built around the idea that the models, the algorithms can look for replication of patterns across written text and begin to identify how those patterns and the context within them fit together. And then that system then builds and gathers and analyzes all this data and information that it's exposed to in a way that synthesizes what it thinks you want and then generates that response in a way that mimics human communication. And so that's where the term generative that you will hear mentioned a lot comes from. It's a process of generating something that is human-like. And large language models are really impressive because they amplify the amount or your ability to synthesize and access a huge amount of information and knowledge, because these models are trained on tens and hundreds of billions, if not tens and hundreds of trillion of different parameters and data points, depending on which model you're using. And I think the amount of data and the patterns that these tools are being exposed to has led to some of the things that we see and hear in the media, and that you hear a lot as AI matures and the models grow, is that it's starting to do a lot of stuff that the people who created them didn't expect it to do. And so all of these blocks on this graphic are emergent abilities. These are things that the models weren't programmed for, but they are able to do. And it's really, I think, boils down to because they are replicating our patterns. They have found in a lot of these instances things that we do automatically and without thinking, and are able to codify them and process that information in that way. And so, these tools, I think, are going to increase in power, increase in the amount of information they have access to, and are going to come out on the other end as tools that can give us incredible abilities to do some great things in extension. It also has, as we'll talk about in a little bit, the opportunity to open us to some major issues and problems that we need to think about as we're using these tools. And so with that, I'm going to transition to the next section, which is the use of generative AI in extension. And I'm not really going to do a very deep dive into these different uses, because we'll have an example from the field session later on where our 4 co-presenters will talk about different real applications of AI in day-to-day extension work. So the following slides are really a high-level overview of some of the things that you could think about using these tools for as you integrate them into your extension toolbox. So teaching and learning is the first area, and Barbara's going to be talking a lot about this, so I'm not going to steal any of her thunder. But there's, the information, the tools can help us process and utilize information in a lot of different ways than perhaps we had considered initially. So these are just some ideas: improve accessibility, help you create and think about what you want to teach and how you're going to teach it. And it's really an opportunity to hone and think about your critical thinking, writing, and scientific skills. So that's several options and opportunities in teaching space, and Barbara will be speaking to that in a little bit. The second area where I've been doing a lot of work in is using AI to help with project management, project planning, and project execution. And so you can input an outline of what you want to do into the system and have it critique it. You don't have to have it generate anything. You're just asking for advice. Or if you don't know where to start, you can ask it to give you an outline. So there's a lot of different ways that you can utilize these tools to help you refine things that you're already doing and things that you've done in the past. And you could get insights into things you may not have thought about looking at, or things that you may have looked at that the AI didn't think about. And so that gives you some clues about what you could potentially do in the future. So project management, planning, and execution is a key thing as well. Then there's communication and outreach, which both Mark and Victor will be talking about different aspects of this. Mark will be talking about the use of AI for chatbots on websites, and Victor will also be talking about the use of AI tools in doing doing marketing and outreach efforts in extension. But this is, I think, one of the fun areas of AI use that you can jump into and utilize these tools for, because you can do some pretty wild things. But again, this is another opportunity for extension. There's coding, data analysis, and visualization. And this is a more specialized aspect of extension and research, but it's certainly not one that should be ignored. And so David is going to be talking about the creation of FAQs from fact sheets and how he has used artificial intelligence to do that. So there's a lot of room here to help streamline and speed up, in some respects, some of the work that you're already doing, using information that you have at hand rather than relying on information from elsewhere. And then last, but certainly not least, it's using AI tools for fun. Ask it to give you some recipes. Ask it to draw some wacky, wild things that you know don't exist, but that you'd like to explore, like a cat sitting in a palm tree on top of Mount Everest. See what it comes up with. Because all of these prompts and things that you can do will help teach you how to more effectively craft and iterate a lot of the prompts that we will use for generating AI-related items. Which moves us to our next section of the session here, which is crafting effective generative AI prompts. And the rest of that stuff we just covered and we'll be covering really doesn't matter if you can't create a prompt that gets you what you want, when you want it, and how you want it. And so the writing process that goes along with using AI and these prompts, especially in the generative AI models, is critical. And it's something that we're all familiar with because that's something we do in extension. But what's different is instead of writing for the sake of writing, you're writing for the sake of programming. What you program and what you type and write are essentially programs that the models and the algorithms use to structure its thinking process to go from the input and the information it has to the output. So because it's based around text, luckily that means normal but well-crafted writing and speech ends up as being our code. And so because of that, it's really not about computer coding, it's more about effective writing skills. And so with any writing event or anything else that you do with writing, you need to begin with the end in mind. What is it that you want to do? Who is your audience? What kind of output do you want? How do you want it to look? What kind of tone do you want to have? Everything that we do in writing fact sheets or educational programs or papers is part of what makes effective crafting or prompt crafting, what makes effective prompts work. And so many of the references and resources that you have for writing can also be used for crafting prompts. And so OpenAI has a quick start guide, which can help you understand how to craft prompts for its GPT-4 models. But it also is a good logical step through of what you can do for crafting prompts. And then Purdue Zal, the online writing lab, is just an outstanding resource to help you think through writing and what you can need to think of if you get stuck in terms of defining audience and goals and things of that nature. So you don't need a fancy coding book. You just need to have good English and good thinking about how to put things together and writing skills. So ultimately, programming prompts or creating prompts is building a conversation. You're starting with a blank slate, a very smart and a very informed blank slate, but has no context around what it is that you are trying to do. So if you don't give it context and you are really wishy-washy about what you are asking it to do, you're going to get a wishy-washy response back. So like in writing, you need to set the context for what you're doing, hearkening back to the conversation I had about bark and bark versus bark. What is the context in which these terms are being used? You need to be clear about what you're asking for and what you're asking it to return. You need to be careful about the order of the sequence of things that come along. You need to be specific about what it is that you're asking it to do and give back to you in terms of bullet lists, or whether you need paragraphs or whatever the case may be. You can provide it examples. If you are sorting a list of terms or you have data that you're asking it to look at, you can give it some examples to help it teach it to process that information in the way that you would like it to. And then also the use of keywords and jargon. I'm going to come back and talk about this in a little bit, but whether or not you use these terms is up to you. But there are ins and outs, especially as you get into more specialized fields, that the system may not be able to understand, or the model may not be able to understand what you're talking about. And it may start to do things like the hallucinations you may have heard about in the news, where it starts to connect the dots in weird and unexpected ways and create information that isn't necessarily factually true or not. And so to provide an example of what this building a conversation looks like and what all these different bullet points could be like, let's do a quick analysis of an example prompt. So the prompt is, we're asking for the AI to draw a picture. And so we want a picture of a person hammering a square peg in a round hole. So, as a human, we probably have a picture of the saying, it's like a person hammering a square peg into a round hole. And so we have a mental picture of what that may look like. But for an AI, they do not have the luxury of having what that mental picture is. So it has to rely on the words to build that picture. And so it will go from the beginning, a person. Okay, I'm drawing a person. Hammering. Okay, that is pounding something or hitting something with something else. What that something else is, we don't know. It could be a stone. It could be a screwdriver. To a kid, anything is a hammer. So really, that's our first kind of wishy-washy term. A square peg. Pegs by definition are cylindrical, not square. And so you've introduced a contextual anomaly there by asking it to think of a definition, peg, which is typically a cylindrical object, and think of that cylindrical object as a square. So that's an area where it may try to do some creative things and jump into the hallucination realm. In is another word. In a round hole could be that the person who is doing the hammering on this peg of some sort is standing in a hole in the ground. It could be a sinkhole. It could be a golf cup or a green cup. It could be a donut hole. We don't provide enough context to the AI to help it understand what kind of a hole we're talking about. And so it needs to fill in the gaps along those lines as well. So that's where, all of these bullet points come into play as we start to build our AI prompts to get the information we're looking for, is really focused around what is it that is it we're trying to get to, and how will the system or the algorithm interpret those words. And that's what this concept of iteration and refinement, where it comes along. even if you get the best, awesomest output from the system, you should always consider it a first draft, because there are going to be terms in words that the system will not recognize. And there may be ways that you can tweak your prompts to be able to find one or two areas that you can change in order to get a better result back, even better than the first one. And one of the things that I like about using these models is there could be, a bullet list that gives you 10 items and everything but one of them is really good. You can ask it to pick that bad item and reevaluate it, or add more information, or add a particular context to it. And so you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can really refine and polish key aspects of what it is that you're looking at as you go through the refinement process. And it only takes one or two words to either make something really, really good or something really, really terrible. And so as you iterate and refine your prompts, you just need to be mindful of meanings of words and how they fit together in the steps that the model will take to go from point A to point B. And it may not be in ways that you expect as well. With all that said, there are limits. And this is where, even the best laid plans can go well awry. The models can experience what is conversation fatigue. And many of you may be experiencing that right now, having sat through 34 minutes of me talking. You're thinking about, oh, what's for dinner? What am I doing this weekend? What game's on the television tonight? And it's really, you may find yourself as you're iterating with the tool that you need to go back and remind it what it is that you're talking about. You may have to reintroduce key concepts back into your chats to get it back on track and focused on what you're trying to do. Any of you who have worked with spreadsheets and databases are probably well aware, but dates are tricky for computers to process and utilize, period. It's not just an artificial intelligence problem. So if you're doing stuff with dates, do be sure to go back and make sure that what it has given you is correct, because there are some things that it just, for whatever reason, cannot do unless you spend time to train it. And I've been able to do that in one occasion with ChatGPT, where it took about 6 iterations for it to finally get the dates in the right order and the right dates. But it took me a lot of refining, a lot of questioning and feedback to get it to work. So just something to be aware of. The third limit that I wanted to talk about is the data that these models are trained on. Some specialization, some professional, like scientific stuff, maybe outside the realm of the data sets that these models are trained on. And so if you ask it for something that's very specific and very scientific, you may not either get an answer, or you may get something back that is obviously not what you asked it for. So as these models become more and more exposed to these data sets, they will be able to give you that information to be able to help you work with that. Or you can take your own information and data and train the model using that to give you the information that you want back. The other thing about training data is that some of these systems or some of these models utilize closed systems. ChatGPT, for instance, it's very specific on its opening page that anything after 2021 is not in the system. The data that the latest model has been trained on is okay through 2021, but after that, it starts to fall off. Now, the caveat to that is that they've since introduced an app for pro subscribers that will allow ChatGPT to do web crawling. And what that means is it can go out to the web and pull information from websites to help feed the data that's already in existence on the ChatGPT side. So you just need to be aware of where the data that these models are running from is kept, and whether it's something that is open to the wild, to the internet, or whether it's something that's very modeled and managed by those that are creating the model or the tool that you're using. And then the last point here is about nuance and real world variation. There is certain terms that these systems may not be aware of. And I'll use bluegill and brim for our angler friends in the crowd. You know, in certain parts of the country, a brim is known as a bluegill, and in certain parts of the country, a bluegill is known as a brim. It's the same fish with just different names. And so if the data that these models were trained on only includes the word bluegill or only includes the word brim, if you ask it for the other term, it may not be able to give you an answer, or it may give you a nonsense answer. So the data that these tools were built on is really critical in understanding how it could potentially respond and give you the information that you're looking for back. It may just simply not be exposed to the terms that you're talking about or that you're interested in. And so that leads us to the final part of this series, which is ethics and bias in generative AI. This is the hot button topic that you hear a lot of people talking about. You see it in the media. It's all over the place. And to me, it's a classic adoption and diffusion issue. All of the technologies that were back on slide 6 all went through these phases of, you know, controversy of one nature or another. And things like automobiles are still embroiled in ethical and bias related type of controversies as well. So, you know, as with any technology, generative AI is a tool, and it's only a tool, and it's up to the people to decide how it's going to be used and where it's going to be used. And so a lot of the issues that we're seeing are really boiled down to the users. The people use the tools without understanding how they were built and how they work. People use the tools beyond the tool's intended purpose. Some of the court cases you may have heard about in the news over the past couple of days. They don't understand the training sets and the fact that the training sets represent not only the best of humanity, but also the worst of humanity. And so all of this adds together to create a lot of complexity and a lot of things that we as users need to to balance as we're using these tools. But my advice and my suggestion and the way I approach it is I treat the outputs that I get from using these models with the same critical eye that I apply to internet search events or results, to news media, social media, Wikipedia, websites, advertisements, the literature, so on and so forth. You can't necessarily use it just on the assumption that it's going to be correct. You need to have some due diligence, double check references, double check information. It's not just something you can pull off the printer and run with. And you shouldn't do that with any of these, right? So as you're doing this and as you're using the tool, you see something that seems off, just Google it, because chances are it is just a figment of how the models pull patterns of stuff that we speak and do together. It may seem off, but it may be perfectly fine, or it could actually be ripping something off, and searching for it can definitely help you find those types of things. So in the end of the day, you're in control, and hopefully some of the tips and some of the tools that we provided and the information we provided can help you understand where some of these potential aspects of things that can get you in trouble will come from, and how you can adjust for them in the long term. So with that, we get to now go do some fun things. And so the next 20 minutes, we will be doing a quick, or 15 to 20 minutes will be a live demonstration of several tools. So if you've never seen these tools, you're in luck, because you're going to get to see how they function firsthand. And hopefully if you have used them before, we'll be able to cover some of the new features that some of them have unleashed in the past day or two as well, that's new to the system. So we're going to be looking at 4 different tools: ChatGPT, which is, and Bing Chat, which are probably the ones that you read about most in the media. And they're also the most widely accessible. I picked Canva Text to Image as an AI app because it's integrated into the broader Canva system. And so many of you may be using Canva as a graphics design and document design tool. And so this is just something you can add to your repertoire in Canva and utilize it to expand your communication and outreach efforts. And then the final one is Gamma.app, which was an app that was presented to us by David a couple weeks ago. And what this is it's a tool that allows you to create documents, websites, and presentation slides based off of an outline or some information that you put in. And so it utilizes an AI tool to build a slide deck for you based around the topic that you give it. And so I'm going to be using two demo prompts across the text tools as well as the graphic tools, just to kind of standardize the response, but then also show you how each of these tools handles the same question a little bit different, and we'll be able to do some iteration as well. And so the last 4 slides of this section, as you get to take a look at this in the upcoming days after you get it, are really a list of highlights, pros and cons of all of these tools. And so as we're demoing it and you see something that's like, yeah, I like that, you can come back and not only get the URL for that particular tool, but then also think about, how does this fit into what it is I'm trying to do in my broader goals as an educator or as a specialist, and is it something that I can utilize in my toolbox going forward? And so those are the 4 slides that are included as this part of the section. So what I'm going to do is try to stop sharing my screen, this screen, and then I'm going to change over stuff. So give me a second and bear with me, to this screen. And then I'm going to try to share this screen. Of course, you're going to do that to me. All right. And I need, nope, that's not it. I need this one brought over here. There we go. All right. And I'm not sharing, am I sharing screen? All right, so first up is ChatGPT. So ChatGPT requires a login. If you have a Google account, it's just a simple effort of clicking a button and it'll bring you into the actual tool itself. And so we had to blow the screen up a little bit so it was visible in the share screen so that you could all read and see what was happening. But on the left side of the screen is the history. And you can, as you can see here, this keeps track of everything that you've done in the tool over the past however many days. I do not know how far back it goes, but here it's back through 2024. And it will actually give you the ability to go back and see. I'm going to do this. You can actually go back and see the prompts that you asked and how you asked them and the results that you got back. And so this is an example of, as I was talking about earlier, the dates and coming up with a list of dates, which I found out it wasn't doing correctly. And months with 31 days, for whatever reason, it was giving me the wrong date. And so I had to work through that. And so that's one of the other things that as you're iterating, you can come back and take a look at what you've done in the past and learn from that and grow from that. So we're going to do a new chat, and I need to grab my prompt, which is hidden somewhere. There it is. Okay, so when you open up ChatGPT, you'll see these little cards here. These are examples of questions you can ask. It goes through some of the capabilities that it offers to you. And it tells you about some of the limitations. You know, as I mentioned, that ChatGPT, GPT-4 is limited to events prior to the end of 2021. After that, it doesn't really include that unless you have the web browsing app. Another thing that I forgot with the wording are inappropriate requests. Some words that are very innocuous have less than innocuous alternative meanings to them as well. So you may find that one of your prompts gets blocked because of that alternative use of a word or a combination of words and that you didn't expect to see. So as you go through, you may need to take that into account and find alternative meanings or alternative words to help express some of the things that you're trying to accomplish. And so I pasted the prompt into the bubble here, the text tools box. And I'm going to hit the paper airplane to send it. And so now it's going through the process of developing the outline that I asked it to put together. And assuming that I had no prior information on this particular topic, it gave me in probably about 15 seconds an outline of a 90-minute training on using artificial intelligence, complete with the time stamps of how long it should potentially take for each of the sections, and then a list of the bullets or topics that you could be considered for each of those sections. So some of this stuff could be applicable to what you're trying to do, and some of it may not. So in this case, I wanted to perhaps be a little bit more focused on the cooperative extension system. So I'm going to ask it, refine what extension educators may be interested in. So we're going to ask it to refine the work it's just done in the context of what extension educators are or might be interested in. And so now it's going back through and redefining that its outline in terms of what it sees as extension. And we'll give it a second here to do that. In some things that I've done, it will simply just replace certain terms with extension. And then in others, it'll actually go through and alter the structure of the components to actually reflect what extension work is about. So going through here, it dropped out a lot of the technical stuff and has actually added some things about outreach and engagement, about teaching, ethics. It's really built in a lot of the extension side of the house, which is good because it had struggled with that with earlier things that I have done. So in a nutshell, that is ChatGPT. One of the limits with ChatGPT is that it does not output graphics. It only outputs text. So if you want graphics, you're going to have to go and use a different tool. But if you're okay without graphics and you just want to take what it gives you and take it into Word or another word processing program and edit it, all you need to do is hit copy and then open up your Word document and click V, and boom, you're off to the races. You've got an outline that you can then go to and start editing and changing and mixing around to meet whatever purpose that you need for your particular use case. So the next one I'm going to talk about real fast is Bing GPT, or I'm sorry, Bing Chat, which is based off the GPT model. And for those of you who are a Windows user, all you need to do to access it is down in your search bar. You either can click this dark blue B in Edge, which will open it up in Edge, or you don't even need to open up the search bar. You can just click on the button and boom, it will take you right to Bing Chat. So I have a couple windows open. So what's one of the new features that was just introduced in the past week is the history bar, which is this bar over here on the left. And you can see the stuff I was working on over the past couple of days in preparation for today's presentation. What's unique about Bing Chat is that it gives you 3 different options for your conversation style for its output. You get a creative mode, which is very creative and very wordy. You have a balanced mode, which kind of balances what the output that you get back between being very wordy and not so wordy. And then you have the precise level, which is very straightforward and to the point and just to the brass tacks. And so you can choose and you can experiment across all these different conversation styles to get the output that you would like. And so I'm going to take the prompt that we had here, and I'm going to pop it into, I've already popped it into the text box here. So, and let's see what Bing gives us in response. And so it may take a while, depending on what the internet traffic is here. So while it's thinking about it, I will say that you can use Bing without a Microsoft account. You can, if you don't have a Microsoft account, you are limited in the number of these sessions or these chats that you have here. You can see since I have an account, I have 30 iterations or 30 chats that I can do. And so it's done. And so here is the same prompt, but a very different response back within this context. And so it is focused more on aspects of artificial intelligence rather than how to use it. But that's also a factor of the fact that we started with the precise conversation. So one of the differences between Bing and ChatGPT is the fact that Bing will actually give you references. It is, even though it's changed on the closed training set GPT, or OpenAI GPT-4, it also has access to the internet. So it is actually pulling information in from the internet to help craft its prompt. So that's something you need to think about, is it is now utilizing the internet to add to this. So you have another set of references and things that you need to account for and check out. So let's quickly change this over to balanced and ask it to do the same thing and see what it gives us back. And you see, here's where the web part comes in. It's searching for topics, 90-minute AI training. And again, a very different response compared to even what the more precise one was. This one's a little more broad and a little more about actual artificial intelligence rather than uses of artificial intelligence. And it does give us some ideas about how we can break things up in terms of time, and it still ends up giving us references. Like ChatGPT, we can say, yeah, we like this. No, we don't. We can copy the text in there, or we can ask it to do something else. So I'm just going to, can you build this for extension work? I can type. So give it a second to process through. See, in this case, the pool of information is drawing from, it's not quite sure. So it gives me a couple options that I can help to refine it. So in this case, it asks for ag extension or community and economic development work or health. So let's just try for ag work. And so now it's thinking about it, and chances are it's now giving us something even a lot more different than it's giving us examples of how it can be used in ag work. So again, same response or same prompt, very different response based off of the style that we asked it to utilize. And so I'm going to do one more with the creative mode, and we'll see what it gives us. And this is the downside of using some of the more popular models at a time of the day that we're using it, because it can get backed up really fast. So let's see what we've got. And so in the creative mode, as you're seeing, it's a lot very similar to the ChatGPT model, except in this case, instead of giving us bullet points or the examples in a bulleted list, it's just kind of lumping it all together into paragraphs. So we would then have to take this and either ask it to process it back into bullet points if that's what we wanted, or we could just use this as is as a guide to further fleshing things out. And as you can see here, it follows up with, can you generate a script for the introduction, give you something that you can talk to. It can create a video if you want, which is one of the interesting things about Bing Chat that's different than some of the other ones, which I'll touch upon in a second. Or you can ask it to do something else. If you're just frustrated, you can say, nah, didn't like this, and start over. One of the new features that Microsoft built into Chat, or to Bing Chat, is the fact that you can now, in creative mode, actually ask it to draw a picture. And so now I am going to, oops, I forgot I started that out that way. So now I'm going to ask it to draw a yellow cow standing on a purple shamrock on the surface of Mars in the style of Bob Ross. And it's a very creative request, very reaffirming. So now it's going through the process of generating the picture. And hopefully it won't take too long to pop it back out. There we go. Not very Bob Ross-like, but it's a yellow cow. And at least in two of the pictures, it appears to almost be standing on a shamrock. And I guess that is the AI's interpretation of what the surface of Mars looks like. But I'll zoom in here so that you all can see that. What it gave back is image 1, image 2, image 3, and image 4. So this is an integration, as you can see here, with the DALL-E AI tool, which was created by OpenAI. And it's a way to tackle or to start thinking about or creating graphics in relation to the topics that you're looking for or trying to work with. And so you can actually we'll give you a link to the actual Bing image creator, and you can actually go in and somewhere in here, it gives you, there we go, creations. It gives you what you created in Bing Chat back and keeps it in a library. So you don't have to save it right away. You can keep it in a library of things that you've created. And so it's kept as a reference for you to come back to at some future purpose. So that's Bing and Image Creator by Bing. As you can see here, this is currently in preview mode. It may not necessarily continue to be free for use. There are boosts that you can use to help prioritize your graphic in terms of everything else. But after those run out, I don't know, you probably will end up having to purchase some if you care about the speed at which your image is generated. And so with that, I'm going to switch back over to Canva, if I can get the right screen. That wasn't it. This is it. And so again, Canva requires an account for you to register for that. It offers both free and pay services. The ones that are paid are the ones that have the little crown beside them. And the AI feature that we're interested in talking about right now is called text to image. And when you go log in for the first time, you'll come to the home screen, at which point you will click apps and then down here to text to image, or you can just Google it and you can pop this up. It'll ask you whether you want to use an existing design, something you already have, or if you want to use it in a new design. So if you're already working on something and in one of the other aspects of Canva and you want to add a graphic to it, you would use the existing design. If you're creating something from scratch and you just want to do a design, you would use the other one. So I'm going to click use new design. And as you can see, it gives you a variety of different formats, preloaded formats that you can create your graphic for. So if you're creating for an Instagram story or a Facebook post, it will load up that preferred size for those social media outlets. If you're doing an email newsletter, it'll do things or maximize the size for that, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different options to create these graphics based off the full suite of tools that are available within Canva, which, as I mentioned earlier, many of your offices may already be using. So use whatever you feel might be the most appropriate. In this case, I'm just going to go with an Instagram post. And this will bring up the AI editor, which is very similar to the other text-based prompts, but this is for creating images. And so I'm going to place our prompt in here. In this case, I tell it the style that I'm interested in, Bob Ross. But if you don't know the style, you can give it a hint by using one of their pre-established styles that they have built in. So there's like film, movie, there's watercolor, photos, dreamy, and anime. Filmic gives you more people, is more based around people. Photo is more kind of landscapey, and then the others just treat the information the way as it's described. So since we're going to Mars, I'm going to take out Bob Ross and click Dreamy. We've already got the square because it's an Instagram, and I'm going to click Create Your Image. And so this actually gives you the countdown bar here. So you can see the progress of it, and there's our results. Let's see, try to blow this up. So it's, try to get it on full screen. Can you see it, Mark? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see it? Good. All right. Thank you. All right. So there's option 1. There's what it came with option 2. Oop. Option 3. And there we go. Option 4. So not exactly what we asked for, but some of them are pretty darn cute, and I would use them in other contexts. So you may not always get what you asked for, but sometimes you do land on some gems. So anyway, and if you don't like what it is, you can ask it to do the same thing over. Just click one of the other styles and have it process it. So again, that's coming, it's popping them in now. 1, 2, 3. There we go. So little claymation-y type looking thing here. So let's say you want to edit it, and you like what you got, but you want to do something different with it. So you can actually click on Edit Photo, and there's a bunch of different AI tools that are available. Well, but one of them right now that's open and freely available is Beta, and Beta is a lot like Photoshop. So if there's something that you want to change, all you need to do is brush over the image, click Continue, and let's say we want a rose. We wanted to create a rose in the spot that we have indicated. We now click Generate, and it will, in a second, indicate or pull together images of roses. In this case, this is not what I was expecting. I wanted like a stem of roses, or a rose stem, or a rose bush. So I should have used something different. But it's just an example of a tool, another AI tool that you can utilize to help edit or add to, or to manage your images within this particular tool. And so that's available in some of the other decks or other image editors as well. And then finally, we're going to switch over to the last of the 4 tools that I wanted to talk about, which is the Gamma app. It requires a login, and it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's a way to create slide decks or documents or websites with the help of an AI, or if you just want to do it on your own, like you would with PowerPoint, you would just click New Blank Deck, and it brings up a blank slate that you can work from. Within the context of the AI, there is a guided use, and then there is a text to deck use. And so you can take an existing outline or an existing format or document and bring it in here, and the AI will take it and break it into slides and create the presentation or whatever for you. And then on the flip side of that is the guided, where you provide the topic and the AI generates an outline based off of what it is that you want. So I'm going to quickly take our prompt from before, stick it in here as a presentation, and I will add the prompt in and click enter. And then it will start coming up with the outline. And so this is the outline that it's suggesting. I'm going to click continue, and I'm just going to click this first theme, and it is in the process of putting our presentation together. And Getting there. There we go. So now you can watch this being generated in real time as it types the text on the slides. It inserts all the images and everything else that would be important for a PowerPoint or a presentation. And so, not knowing how long this is going to take, I'm going to go ahead and just minimize this for a moment, stop screen sharing, and I'm going to move back into the main presentation. Or actually, I won't move into the main presentation because others are going to be sharing their screen here in a second. So we're going to move into our examples from the field section. And first up is Barbara O'Neill, who is going to talk to us about technology in education. Or AI in education. Sorry. Thanks, Barbara.
Okay, let me just pop up the slide here and be set to go. Okay, so I'm very glad to be here today and describe a little bit about what we've been doing with AI in the OneUp team, specifically the personal finance concentration area of OneUp. And just to explain a little bit what OneUp is, as Jason noted before, our former name was Military Families Learning Network. And what we do is we're kind of a consortium of land-grant university professionals and contractors such as myself who work with them. And we provide virtual professional development for family service providers. So these are the service providers for military families. So on our particular team, we're interacting with financial counselors who are stationed on military installations all around the world. So that's kind of the work that we do. And OneUp is kind of a joint partnership between NIFA USDA and the Extension Foundation and the Department of Defense. And just a little bit about my background. I was with Rutgers Cooperative Extension for 41 years. I've had a business called Money Talk for 31 years doing personal finance education. And I just want to stress that I am not a geek. I am a financial educator, but I've always been really up to trying new technology tools. And, Twitter, I was kind of an early adopter of Twitter and some other tools as well. And I also happen to have a brother who is a AI geek, so he's been teaching me a lot as well. So our first foray into artificial intelligence was a blog post that I wrote. So one of the deliverables that OneUp does for our constituent audience is to produce a blog once a week. So I write most of the blogs for our concentration area. And I decided to write one about ChatGPT. I had just attended a training that was done for teachers, and I got a lot of good information. And I thought, wow, a lot of this could really be useful for the personal financial managers, or PFMs, who are on the installations. Those are our target audience. So I wrote a blog post that just basically described ChatGPT and some of the basics that Jason outlined for you today. And then at the end, I just listed some different ways that these financial counselors on the bases could use this information in their work. So one thing that teachers are doing a lot is they're taking those hallucinations, that erroneous data, and using it as a teaching tool, asking their audiences to say, this isn't right. What's wrong with this picture? And then people have to pick out the inaccuracies. Question and answer quizzes, discussion questions, talking points. It can even change the reading level of an article. So if you need to get something at a 6th grade reading level or something like that, you can take text and have it change the reading level. It can create book and article summaries, songs and poems, rubrics, even recommendation letters. And again, what we're talking about is first drafts. We're not talking about anything that's final. So then we decided, okay, so we've told the PFMs how they can use this artificial intelligence. Maybe we should use it ourselves. So I was doing a webinar for OneUp in March about mutual funds. And I said to Kristen Jowers, who I work with, I said, let's try some ChatGPT to create the questions. And we went through a couple iterations. And what I will tell you is exactly what Jason told you, is that you got to play with it. So the first iteration, I just asked it to create questions about mutual funds, and it wasn't that great. But then I changed the prompt and asked it to create the questions from information in Unit 6 of the Cooperative Extension home study course, Investing for Your Future. So I directed it to an extension resource, and the questions came out a whole lot better. But then the problem with that is some of the questions, the answers were so much longer than others. And if you've ever taken a course in question and answer writing, you should always keep them about the same length, because if the right answer is much longer, it stands out. It's kind of a giveaway. So then I had to go back into it again and tell it to do the same thing, but to keep the answers approximately the same length. So you just keep working with it until you find it doing something that you want. And it will take several iterations to do that. Okay, some more things that you can do with it. And again, we're talking first drafts only. Letters, emails, templates. Maybe you are creating an RFP document, or you're responding to an RFP that somebody has put out to get some funding for a project. You're applying for grants, for awards. Again, you have to give it the information that's going to respond to, but if there's a link somewhere online that you can show what the criteria are and what the funder is looking for, you might be able to get at least a decent first draft. Presentation scripts, case studies. Of course, with personal finance, we would have them around personal finance kind of decisions people would make. Lit reviews. Now, I will caution you on this because I actually had experience with this today. I had, one of the things that we do for our PFMs is one of the blog posts each month is a research brief. So I briefly describe a research study and then the implications for educators. And so I asked it to create me a list of literature in financial planning journals in 2002 and 2023. And I will second what Jason said. It does not like dates at all. And when I mentioned 2023, it said, we cannot predict the future. That's what its response was. So I had to go back and refine it. And I did get a list of literature reviews, but when I was working with that list this morning to write some research briefs, I think some of them were phantom studies. So it can hallucinate on literature reviews and reference citations, just like it can with text. Research results, show notes for podcasts, just so many things that you can do with it. Next Gen Personal Finance, which is the organization for teachers that I told you I had attended their initial webinar, they just did a study recently with all the teachers and participants in that webinar back in February and asked them what they had been doing with ChatGPT, 2 months in. And these are some things that the teachers mentioned that also could be useful in extension education as well. Trivia questions, skits, role play scenarios, differentiated writing prompts, because maybe you have different audiences and you want to ask the question different ways for different audiences. That might be a possibility. Summarizing text, discussion questions. So there's just so many things that you can do with it. So just to summarize my quick section, I'm stealing this from Dr. Worthy at the University of Georgia. She presented a workshop on AI at a recent professional conference. And I think what she said was really spot on, that AI will force us as educators to think about some pretty hard things. What are we teaching? Why are we teaching it? What things are worth making students struggle with? And in other words, if they can get the answer very quickly through artificial intelligence, maybe they should be using it. And what can we do to make things easier for our audiences by using AI? And then also remembering that it's always going to be a first draft. Also, just two other things. Just keep in mind that This is just one more technology that we will have to adapt to. I started with Rutgers Cooperative Extension in 1978. We did not even have computers in 1978. So never mind social media, the various software programs, all the other things that we've all had to adapt to throughout our entire career. AI is just going to be one more thing. And then the final thing that Dr. Worthy said that I would just second 100% is that AI is a tool and it will never, ever replace your critical role as a human being, as a mentor, as a clarifier, as a curator of information, because people are on information overload, and there's going to be even more information when AI starts really spewing out a lot. We're going to have so much information overload. People will need to have a clarifier and a curator and a comforter. And it will never replace human creativity as well. So again, just think of it as a tool, as a resource, and think about ways that you can put it into your personal and professional life. So I think I'll stop sharing here and turn it back to Jason.
All right. Thank you, Barbara. Next up is Mark Locklear to talk about Extension Chatbot. Mark.
Okay. Hey folks, my name is Mark Locklear. I'm a web developer and project manager here at Extension Foundation, and just going to take a few minutes and talk about Extension Bot. This is a project Extension Foundation has been funding and working on for 12 to 18 months now. Essentially, it is a chatbot. However, it's a chatbot that is being trained specifically on extension-based data. So just a couple of points here on this slide, and then I'll flip back to the web browser and I'll actually show you an example of it in action. Extension Bot's built on the RASA framework. RASA is an open source machine learning chat-based conversational AI framework. The generalized instance of Extension Bot, and I'll talk about more about that in a couple of slides, is this generalized instance is trained on the Ask extension data. So some of you may be familiar with what was previously called Ask an Expert, what's called Ask extension now. We've got somewhere close to 500,000 asked and answered questions. We use that data set to train Extension Bot on. So the responses you get back are going to be answers from Ask extension. In addition to the Ask extension database of questions, we also did pilot projects with Oregon State and Oklahoma State and had them give us data sets that we've also trained Extension Bot on. So in addition to the Ask extension data, we've also got data from 2 additional institutions, and we are seeking more, but I'll talk more about that in a second. And again, yeah, as I just mentioned, this third bullet point here can also be trained on other data sets. This is where you come in. I'll talk more about that in a second, but just to show you a real quick example of what Extension Bot looks like. I have it embedded on this page. So Extension Bot can be embedded in any website you want. It's just a JavaScript snippet, so you can add it to any HTML page. And I'll use an example here. I'll say, what is the best fertilizer to use for my blueberries? And we're going to get a response back here. This is not as conversational as ChatGPT is. If you'll notice here, we're giving direct links to resources. Now, that's the way it's configured at the moment. We're sort of in the minimum viable product stage, if you will, now, and so we're experimenting with different ways to explain this data, but this is sort of the way we're doing it right now. Rather than synthesizing the information and giving a text response back like some other AI tools that we've looked at are, we're actually giving you links to the actual resource here. So you can see that there's a snippet from the actual resource here. That's what the text you see is. Of course, you can click on this link, and then I can go here. And now if you notice here, the specific question I asked was about what's the best fertilizer to use. If I actually search down, you can see here as part of this response to this ask extension question, they gave some pretty detailed information about fertilizer and blueberries. So that's sort of how that worked. So I just wanted to show you that example just so you could actually see the tool in action. So again, as I mentioned, this is about a 10-line, the sort of minimalist version of it's about a 10-line Java snippet of JavaScript that you can drop in any web page. There's various, I won't get into the client configuration options you've got here, but again, as I said, the general client is just going to give you responses from the 500,000 or so questions from Ask Extension. However, you and your individual state can have your own version of Extension Bot if you want. So again, I mentioned we did pilot projects with Oregon and Oklahoma State, and they gave us sets of resources from their state to the tune of anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000. So you do need a sort of corpus of data that's large enough so you've got a viable training model there. And then they have implemented state-specific versions of Extension Bot on their website. So again, the idea there is you can work with Extension Foundation. Again, I won't get too far in the weeds, but you can work with us. We have a specific data standard in place, and if you're willing to share, again, these public data sets with us, we're able to train Extension Bot on that, and you can deploy a state-specific version of Extension Bot on your website. Again, you can see an example of it on. You can see an example at askhelp.extension.org. There's more detail at extension.org/extensionbot. And then the last thing, just to give you a sense of what the data contribution process looks like: identify relevant data sources, make data available via a JSON dump that can conform to the data standard we've got. Generally, this should be, it doesn't have to be, but it should be publicly accessible data. And then we also, the goal here too is to build a pipeline so this data is updated on some regular basis. If you're interested in learning more about that, now this is a fair amount of work for your IT folks at your institutions, so that this is not something you as an individual agent can do. It's certainly going to be something that's going to have to be raised up to the level of your local IT folks and the folks that control data and content at your institution. But I'm happy to speak with anyone about what that process looks like and answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Up next is David Warren to talk about creating FAQs from fact sheets using AI. David?
All right, guys, I will try to give you just a quick practical example of how we can use one of the large language models. So I'm going to use Bing as my example here. And also let me start by saying that this is a proposed use here at Oklahoma State University. This has not been approved yet. So I have suggested it to the head of our extension service. Let me explain the use case, and then I'll show you how this works. We have several thousand official applications, like most extension services do, on our website, and they get lots of traffic. The ones that I've noticed that have sort of FAQs or questions written into them, questions and answer sets, perform much better, and they get a lot more search traffic than ones that do not. They also are easier to understand because that simple sort of question answer format, either above or at the end of the lengthy text describing whatever that fact sheet's describing, is very helpful for people in understanding some of the key points of the publication. So we've wanted to develop FAQs for several thousand of our publications for a while. It just hasn't really been practical. So we're trying, I now have experimented with Bing Chat, and I could develop really pretty good FAQs for, say, 5 fact sheets in about 5 minutes. So I can do probably 1 a minute. Of course, those have to be reviewed. We're not going to do anything like this without sort of author approval and that sort of thing. But this is just an example of the kind of stuff you could do with the generative capability or the ability to create text in a chat bot. So let me share my screen real quick. And let's see, I'll expand this. So you see I'm using Bing at the moment. And there we go. So this is, we come to the page, it's asking me if I want to use the chat bot, and I say yes. And I would stop, give me an example, and I'll just paste in, whoops, it's bouncing around here. I'll paste in my question. Whoops, that is not my question. So had it over here. So for example, here's one of my questions. Right, 5 FAQs, and since it's Bing, it'll actually go out and hit this URL and then write a live answer to it. So and we wait just a moment. So I'll talk while it's trying to think and write. There we go. So this is this is actually our most popular publication that gets, I don't know, like 100,000 views a month this time of year, particularly. This would be, actually a really nice addition to it that answers some key questions that could be put at the top or at the end. And you can see this is just a straight, plain vanilla prompt. I didn't go through some of the efforts that Jason sort of explained earlier of how you might write a really effective prompt. Before I would use this one, I would probably say, okay, revise and improve that and make it a little bit better. But just out of the gate, this is what's called a zero shot, or basically just a single question without any context added to it. It's doing a really good job of using ChatGPT's algorithm. This is GPT-4, which is the most current algorithm. That does a pretty fine job of it. So that's just one example of something where it went out and grabbed that, looked at the content live on our website and brought it back and wrote live, the series, essentially this series of short summaries of key points of the fact sheet. And I can say that one thing that LLMs do really well is summarization. They do it extraordinarily well. So that's a use case to think about. So I know we're running long on time, so I'll stop there and I'll cede my time back to Jason.
That didn't help. I have to unmute myself. There we go. So last but certainly not least of our samples from the field is Victor Villegas, who's going to talk to us about using these tools in communications and outreach. Victor.
Thanks, Jason. Wow, great examples from everyone. I'll try to keep this short and really quick. So I've been using ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion, DALL-E for some communications and marketing. Let me share my screen quickly here. So you all might not realize, but you've already been using AI for a while. If you're doing any type of translation on like Google Translate at Oregon State University, we now have automatic translation of our website real time into Spanish. So here is our English. If we click on En Español, we're using the Google Translate plugin on Drupal, and it automatically on the fly translates into Spanish. Now we do have a way of overwriting anything that we think has not been translated correctly. Sometimes when you have some scientific terms and whatnot, Google Translate has not learned that yet, but we found that has gotten very, very good in the last couple of years. And I would say, being a Spanish bilingual English person, that the Spanish that it is translating is probably about 90–95% accurate, if not better than that at this point. So that's one really obvious way of using AI for communications. ChatGPT I've been using quite a bit. I've used it to do a mission statement for one of our learning communities for Association of Communication Excellence, which is a communications association for a lot of folks at land-grant universities and in ag communications. I had to come up with a mission statement for our learning community, and so I just put some words and phrases that I thought we could use, and it made a mission statement for me. Very minimal editing, did it in less than 5 minutes. This was excellent. We were doing a promotion for a broadband series of meetings, and my boss asked if I could do some posts on Twitter and Facebook, and I said sure. So I took the information that was given And I say, make a social media campaign with this information, and give me 3 posts for Twitter and 3 posts for Facebook. And it did it. It even created a hashtag on its own that the hashtag does not exist, which is great because we like to use hashtags that are not being used by other people. We did edit it. It wasn't perfect, but it was pretty darn good first draft, like some other folks have been talking about. And it cut the turnaround time really well. ChatGPT also does translation. So I said, okay, translate these this campaign, this Twitter post and Facebook post into Spanish so we can also post in Spanish. And it did it. Well, a couple more here. I know we're at time. ESP, the National Association that a lot of you belong to, we were promoting it here at OSU for folks. I went on to ESP, got the about information, and I wanted to put it into our newsletter. I took that information, put it into ChatGPT, and says, give me a 300-word promotion so that we can put into our e-newsletter here at Oregon State University Extension. And it did it, and it's like, oh, it's a little bit wordy. Redo it and do it in 150 words. And it made it, and it's great. It's succinct. It has everything we want on there. And the only thing we had to add is contact information for sure if someone wanted more information. Lastly, I did a bit of K through 12 outreach and engagement. And let's see, put this thing down. So I've been using that for some of my presentations. Here was a poem that I made. It's called In the Forest, Smack in the Middle of It All. It's about sustainability and conservation. And all of these graphics were created in Stable Diffusion. So really simple, easy way to get something. I told it what I want to do based on the text in the poem. And then on my Instagram account here at Drone Singer, I use DALL-E, which is similar to Stable Diffusion. It's an image AI generation tool. And I told it create an astronaut mariachi playing a guitar on Mars. And this is the first image that came up. So a little hokey. This was last year. It's improved much better. Faces and hands, fingers are getting a little bit better. Here's another example of that. Okay, and I did this on my iPhone using Dawn AI, a different application. So again, a mariachi. It's kind of weird. He's got 3 hands instead of 2. So it's kind of guessing, but that's definitely an astronaut, and that's a guitar. I don't know if it's a mariachi. So there is some bias on some of these things that really doesn't know what a mariachi is. But I use another program that was able to. And then this is one, it's like, give me a robot playing a modular synthesizer, and it did this in seconds. So great for presentations, great for K through 12 STEAM outreach and engagement. So these tools are mostly freely available. We got some resources. If you haven't yet, we encourage you to join the Technology and Extension Education subgroup, and I'm sure Mark will talk about that. But that's it.
All right. Thank you, Ricardo. Ricardo. I am having a bad day, Victor. I'm sorry. Thank you, Victor. We do realize we're a little bit over time, so if you do have to leave, we certainly understand. Thank you for coming today and being here, and thank you for all the great questions. There are some are related to Victor's presentation. If you're willing to stick around for a few more minutes, we'll try to get those answered. And if you do have to leave, thank you for being here. We put a number of links into the chat for our feedback form, as well as links to some of our other professional development opportunities that we have that please feel free to take advantage of. And so the one question that was asked, which is a question I had, are the translations correct? And were the translations culturally competent or correct, if you will, that you did, Victor?
Right, so we've done some testing, and fortunately we have a few folks, myself included, that can review that information. And yes, I've worked as a professional medical interpreter in the past, so I still do document translation every once in a while. So I'm very familiar with professional translations. And like I said, it's 95% accurate, culturally relevant. We've also did a DEI audit of our website prior to that, and we try to have people be aware of that, and we're constantly looking at stuff, see if we have to change some of the translations or watch out for some bias. That stuff still has, some of that has to be done manually, but just the translation for, I don't know, 80% of our content right now that's online to be done automatically is such a huge time saving.
Thank you. So another question that came into the question and answer box is, because you are bilingual, you can evaluate the translation. What recommendations do you have for those who are not bilingual and can't confirm that the translation is correct or accurate? Sorry.
Sure. Well, there's contractors available. You can talk to your constituents, certain audience, if you have a committee of folks that you want to volunteer and look at it. But as a professional translator and interpreter, I feel fairly confident in using that for most of the stuff. So don't have, unless you're getting to more technical types and something that you might think is more about liability, canning and whatnot, you want to make sure things are correct. But otherwise, most of your content, 70, 80% probably could be just fine. And it's only getting better.
Thank you, Victor. Mark, I saw you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. Somebody asked in chat, how do you upload Excel data to AI systems? To me, that's one of the most exciting parts of this. So you can't really do that. I mean, you can paste in. I can't remember what the current character limit is inside ChatGPT, but this idea of, okay, I have this bespoke set of data and I want to expose ChatGPT to that and then ask it questions about that data. One option is we recently, I think Jason mentioned that ChatGPT just recently released a plugin or functionality to point to a specific web page to basically look at live data that's out on the web now. So one option, I have not experimented with that, but one option is that, okay, if you've got a web page that has a specific set of data, you can actually specifically reference that URL and then maybe ask or have questions about that. To this specific question about Excel data, let's say, there's a lot of conversation in the software development world about that. So I can take a specific code base and, okay, if I want, and I could upload that code base or expose ChatGPT or some other AI tool to a specific code base and then ask questions about that code base, add features to it, do those sorts of things. So I think the way we're going to see that unfold is plugins in these individual systems. So for instance, I can envision whether it's Excel, Word, whether it could be on the Google side, a Word doc or a Google Sheet, where you can have a AI plugin there where you can essentially inject the data in a spreadsheet, a document, whatever code base maybe you have. You can expose the AI tool to that and then ask specific questions about that. Or again, in the case of Excel, okay, write me a function that's going to add cells, columns A and column C, and sum those into a specific cell. So again, the technology is so new now that those specific tools aren't there yet, but we're going to see those coming in the coming months and years.
So there's a related question about, could it also work with a Google Sheet, which I think you kind of answered that it's probably going to be an app or plugin type specific thing that allows it to do the translations. Yep.
And in fact, I think Microsoft Word has that now. I think the 365 version maybe, which is the online sort of version of Microsoft Word, has some Bing some Bing capabilities that are doing some AI sorts of things where you can have it make suggestions for you and insert that. In fact, I think Gmail is doing that now. I've noticed the last 6 months or so, as you're typing an email out into Gmail, it'll make suggestions for you about future text, and that's all AI generated technology.
Cool. David, you unmuted. Did you want to add into this?
That was entirely accidental. Sorry about
Okay. Not a problem.
Well, maybe David, I think, was answering this in Q&A as well, but we had a chat question come in of, are AI images free of copyright to use? Maybe.
Yeah, I'll throw out what I know about it. Again, I am not an attorney. I'm not offering legal advice. So with that out of the way, there was a court case last fall on this topic, and the ruling was that the AI generated images machines can't own anything at this point. Machines are not people. Therefore, the ruling essentially is that the content that the images fell in the public domain, so that you can't copyright them. I would be very surprised if that lasted long. As much money as behind some of these companies, I would expect that somebody's going to really want to own those images. So I would expect there'll be many court cases to follow. So that's I don't know if anybody else knows any different. Please.
Well, I was going to say, I think the terms of use are important too, right? Each of these, whether it's ChatGPT or any of these companies that are doing this sort of work, are going to have to adjust their terms of use. I think right now, number one, the technology is so new that they just want people using it and giving feedback. So we're in one of these fun times where, at least my opinion is, go out and use it, and like, don't worry about those things. Now, that being said, again, as David said, I'm not a lawyer either, and it's probably worth giving credit if you do use these tools and you're using it in a, you're using it in a way that's a large part of your content, let's say, is being developed in one of these tools. It certainly doesn't hurt to give credit, but I think that right now it's untested in the courts, and so we don't know. I mean, I think the other thing to think about is, even if it's not a legal issue, it's always not a good look. There was a case, I think it was a university in the Northeast. They were generating I think it was a media release that the university did, and it turns out that a large portion of it was developed in ChatGPT, I think, and it was exposed that was the case, and like, there wasn't a legal issue with it, but it wasn't a good look for the organization and for the university. So I do think that that's something to think about, especially if you're doing things that have a large, public viewing, or folks can see in some kind of explicit way.
Yeah, and I saw Aaron's comment there about, they're already in court, several, issues with the data that all these generative, the data sets that are training these platforms, right? So maybe the output right now is unclear whether that's copyrighted, but it's definitely some of the stuff that is being, the data sets that are being trained on are copyrighted. And so how much of a derivative and originality is the final product if it's based on something that is copyrighted and owned by someone else? I mean, there's one artist who had a very unique style, and it's gotten to the point where there was more AI-generated artwork in his style than his own style coming up on Google searches, right? And so that's his livelihood, that's his particular style. And so he's trying to sue, or at least have them not allow his style to be part of the data set and whatnot. But cat's out of the bag. I don't know how far you can go, and it's already, the damage has already been done, but what can we do to prevent some of that in the future? They're trying to put in some filters in there. I was listening to someone from Google and talking about Bard and how they're trying to, the black box of AI, you don't always know why it's doing certain decisions, why it's picking certain things and doing some things. We know the input, we know the output. It's the stuff in the middle that can kind of be a little confusing, but they're trying to make it so that you can go back in time and see the decision tree and at least tag or have the AI platform tag where it's grabbing that information from, and then possibly make that decision whether that was a copyrighted image or content or not, and then go from there. But everything's still new and it's changing hourly. I don't even want to say daily anymore. It's just insane.
Yeah, and that's one of the new features that Google Bard is actually releasing as part of its current update, is including images, but identifying where they're at and where they're from, and taking you back to their original source. So I think the big companies are realizing that they kind of created a quagmire that they could get caught up in, and they're working to, I don't want to say backtrack, but to fill some of those holes that they made to be able to protect themselves as well as protect those who are using their tools. So I think Victor is correct. It's changing hourly, hour by hour. New things are popping up and coming out. So a lot of stuff to keep track of. Have your kids question, and have your kids go to trade school because academic knowledge experts might not be valued in 20. Could be. It's hard to
Well,
say.
you
Can't
know,
predict the
Robots
future.
that are going to be doing the.
Yeah, listen, to me, these tools are like, you know, the scientific calculators that came along in the 70s or so. If you talk to folks, I mean, there's still a few folks around who used slide rules back in the 1950s, and like those folks didn't not do their jobs anymore when scientific calculators came out. Now, the problems they were solving tougher problems, and the tools made them more efficient. But I think humans, we're creating these tools, and we're the ones that are using these tools. So the other side of this is, listen, the bar is going to be raised for the work that all of us are doing, no matter, not just here in the extension, but whether you're in finance, banking, education, whatever it is, the bar is going to be raised because these tools are open to everyone. So that's why I'm encouraging folks, you'll get left behind if you're not using these tools, because from the examples you've seen here, especially the ones that Victor was showing us, and the ones Jason did too, that you can just get so much more done using these tools.
Yeah, Barbara, do you want to speak to the comment you put into the chat?
Yeah, well, I've just read some articles on it, and the salary range that I read in the article was 200K to 350K for prompt engineers at some companies. So it's definitely a well-paid career. I don't know all the training that goes involved to whether they have certifications or credentials, but
it's not. Yeah, it's, you know, I've talked to months. You know, in the software engineering realm, we kind of joke about it that it's a job now, and like the joke is it's not going to be a job for long, because I mean right now it's so new that I think there are people, but I mean, it's to your point, Barbara, when you were talking about being able to iterate and knowing how, you know, to me it's sort of like Google searches were 10 years or so ago. I think we moved from keyword searches early on to Google sort of took it to a next level where it was a little more natural language, not 100%, but you were starting to ask questions inside Google search, and rather than being keyword searches, it was more natural language. And I think ChatGPT has taken it to that next level where we do need to sort of change. If you're used to doing keyword searches in Google, I think the next level is to go to, okay, I'm going to ask a question the same way. If I have a physics question and I'm asking a physicist a particular question, like that's the way you're going to ask it, right? If it's a blueberry, if it's a question about fertilizing blueberries, I'm going to ask it like I'm asking a extension professional who that's their area of expertise, and this whole idea of natural language.
I completely agree with Mark. I think the idea that creating prompts for AI is going to be a big job, a big field, is completely bogus. There may be a few people out there, but just like using search engines as part of your job, using spreadsheets as part of your job becomes parts of everybody's job. Using AI is going to be parts of everybody's job. And as these versions improve, and then there'll be probably another version into this year, you know, maybe it'll be ChatGPT or GPT 4.5 or GPT 2. It'll be substantially better than it is now, and you'll have less and less of these sort of, you know, tricks that you need to pull to make it give you really good responses.
yeah, well, that's why I use the word currently.
Yeah, yeah.
Jason, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah. I was just, Mark's comment about in the 90s, HTML was the thing. And now it's like, yeah. So a couple questions. So one that I got in chat, which I think is a great question that I'll throw out. So we will be sending the questions and answers out along with the links to the slides. And as well as I will be copying the prompts that I created, as well as the outputs and including those so you can continue the journey if you would like to explore using those. And then it looks like David is responding to Sean's, which I had actually responded to in chat. Sorry, Sean, if I didn't get it to you in time. Or if, and so
I'll give a live response if you want.
Absolutely.
Real quick.
Please do.
Yeah. So if the point is, can you basically get consistent structure or tone or voice from large language models? And the answer is you can, but out of the box, not necessarily. You know, if you're using one of these big commercial platforms, there are a huge proliferation of custom tools out there that do very specific things. And you can indeed pay somebody to do custom development to train it on a corpus of content that you want it to use, such as all the press releases that your university has created over the past 2 years or whatever. So it's definitely possible and might require some custom development.
Excellent. Any other last questions? I know we are 20 minutes over where we were supposed to be, but we've had a lot of great conversation, a lot of great questions, and a lot of good points that have been raised. And the one, excuse me, the one question was about bias, and I think David had responded to that one. And the commenter was absolutely right. There's probably 1,001 different areas of bias that we could have mentioned and, you know, arguably should have mentioned in this. So the one that was mentioned is one of many, many, many different sources that need to be considered when you're tackling and using these tools. And that's where you have to exercise some judgment as a user as to whether or not that matters to the goal that you're trying to achieve or not. So it's a very valid point and appreciate you bringing it up. So it doesn't look like we have any.
No, I have one more question that came in through the chat.
Oh.
Angela asks, if you use it to revise all of your old publications with it, does it still belong to the original person and not Microsoft Bing or other tools?
Depends on the terms I'm sorry. I'll throw it in answer maybe Victor in a second. So if you're using Bing, or maybe even you drop it into Microsoft Word, because if you use the online version of the Office 365 version of Microsoft, so you drop it, you can throw content into Word, and it uses a large language model. I don't know if it's GPT-4 or not. It probably is. And you can revise things directly in Word that way. I don't know what what your contract from your organization ever bought that license from Microsoft says regarding ownership, and that's going to rule what that contract says. Likely, it doesn't say that whatever you put in there is owned by Microsoft. I would guess. I don't know for sure, but I would guess that that's not the case, because I can't imagine that universities agreeing to terms that would say anything you create in Word is now owned by Microsoft. So again, disclaimer: we're not lawyers. So.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say, that's happening because of those types of concerns, as well as privacy concerns, sharing proprietary data. That stuff is going into their database, but a lot of people are now developing ChatGPT-ish like programs that run internally and are not exposed to the public. And so you put it on your own servers. It might not have as extensive a data set, but you can learn your data, and then it's just going over your stuff, and so you can have more control over that proprietary information.
And again, that's let me tell folks, that's what we're trying to do with ExtensionBot. I mean, the front end right now is ExtensionBot and that chat tool, but my goal is to continue bringing universities on. We're asking them to build this pipeline at their individual institutions that's constantly updating, not only adding new data, but maybe getting rid of stale data too, and then training our own language model on that. Right now we're using Rasa, but we're looking at using ChatGPT or our own. There's some open source language models out there, but the goal would be, I mean, think about how awesome it would be to have our own language model trained on just extension resources across all institutions, and what that would look like, and the quality of the responses that users will be able to get back. I mean, also from a research standpoint too, think about someone working on a research article and they're able to interact with that to find out, number one, find out what research has already been done or is being done, to be able to look at other publications that are out there and be able to get smart, relevant responses back based on that. So big things.
All right. Any other questions in chat, Molly? Nope. All right. So I'm going to call it a day. Thank you all so much for sticking with us for the extra 25 minutes now, as we dove way deeper into this than we probably all thought we might, but it was a good conversation, and it just points out the best way to learn about these tools is to use them. Be careful about reading terms of service and understanding where the data is coming from. And last but not least, in terms of extension and adoption and diffusion, help others understand those key issues as well. Because as we've noted here in this discussion, is that these tools are going to stick around, and we've been using them unconsciously for many years now. So how can we all do things a little bit differently and a little more intelligently and informed in an informed manner to make these tools our best friends going forward? So with that, I'm going to say thank you all. If you have the opportunity, there's some links in the chat to our professional development series. We actually had 2 sessions talking about AI, 3 actually, now that I think about it. In our dynamic discussion in March, we had a conversation about AI in general. And then in October and January, we also had specific discussions around aspects of applied AI use and extensions. So if you are a member of an employee of a member institution, feel free to check those videos out. If you're not a member institution, you can still attend our program center stage and access those videos and see what a lot of the other programs are doing across the country as well. And so with that, again, thank you so much for your patience. Thank you to Victor, Mark, David, and Barbara for adding to the conversation here today. Thank you, Molly, for keeping all the frogs in the wheelbarrow and keeping it moving. And thank you all again for being here and for sticking around for the extra 27 minutes now. And with that, I'm going to bid you all a good afternoon, and we will hopefully see you again at another Extension Foundation program. Thanks.